On the 21st of October, 1882, 14 years after the night the Indiana vigilantes had taken her husband out of the New Albany jail, Margaret Holt was breaking a 4-year-old roan mare in the south paddock of the Bartlett Ranch on Sweetwater Creek, 16 miles southwest of Rawlins, Wyoming territory, when she saw the dust of a single buggy on the Rawlins road and recognized, without yet knowing the face of the driver, the way the dust hung in the air. She had carried a pair of pearl-handled Smith & Wesson Schofields in the bottom of a cedar trunk for those 14 years. She had not, in any of them, taken the trunk out. She did not stop the mare. She let the mare turn one more circle on the lunge, and then a second, and then she walked the mare in, loosened the cinch, and slipped the bit. The mare blew once and did not throw her head. Margaret had broken her over 6 mornings in September with the gentle method she had been taught by an old Comanche-trained scout outside of Junction City, which method required a great deal of quiet breathing and very little rope, and which method the Bartlett foreman Tom Calder had watched on the first morning and not interfered with on any morning after. She tilted her Stetson lower against the noon glare and pulled the bandana up to her chin. The buggy was still half a mile out. There was time. The snow forecast had come in by telegraph from Cheyenne 2 evenings before, and it gave 2 weeks. She had walked through enough Wyoming Octobers to know that 2 weeks of telegraph forecast was, in practical terms, 8 days. The herd had to come in off the upper pasture by Saturday next. The bank in Rawlins had to be paid the overdue note by the 1st of November. She had counted, that morning, the silver in the iron box under the floorboard of her room above the bunkhouse kitchen, and she had counted the cattle on the upper pasture from the saddle on the previous Friday, and the numbers she felt would meet, but not by much, and not if anything entered the calculation that she had not allowed for. A single buggy on the Rawlins road on a Saturday in October was something she had not allowed for. She put the mare in the small corral by the barn. She wiped her hands on the leather chaps. She did not change her shirt. She walked at her usual pace across the yard to the ranch house, and she was standing on the porch with a tin coffee pot in her left hand when the buggy turned in at the gate. The man on the driver's bench was 41 years old by her count. He had grown a beard that he had not worn in 1868, and he had put on 20 pounds, and there was new grey at the temples under the hat, but the way he held the reins between the second and third finger of his right hand had not altered in 14 years. Margaret had watched him hold reins that way in a Jackson County livery yard in the September before the lynching, and she had watched him hold the reins that way for a full 2 minutes, that September afternoon, while a Pinkerton man, whose name Margaret never properly learned, rode past on the other side of the street and did not look in. It was not a thing one forgot. He climbed down. He did not look at her at first. He looked at the barn. He looked at the brand burnt into the corral fence. He took his hat off and beat the dust out of it against his knee, and then he looked at her. "Mrs. Holt," he said, "I'm John Vance, out of Cheyenne, cattle buyer." She did not put down the coffee pot. "I do not recollect having had your acquaintance, Mr. Vance," she said, "but the coffee is hot." She used the Pennsylvania-Boston English she had used in her aunt's parlor on Mount Vernon Street in '74, the kind she had not used in a Wyoming yard before that minute. It was a deliberate thing. He had to know she knew. His mouth moved at the corner, half a smile. "Coffee'd suit me," he said. She poured for him in a tin cup. The coffee was hot enough to scald, and she did not warn him about the cup. He took it in his ungloved right hand, and he did not flinch. She had not expected him to flinch. Tom Calder came out of the barn while the buggy was still settling on its springs. He had his Winchester .73 in the crook of his left arm, the way he carried it when he was checking on the south paddock, and he stopped on the second step of the porch and said, without inflection, "Mrs. Holt." "Mr. Calder," Margaret said. "Mr. Vance is a cattle buyer out of Cheyenne. He has come to talk with us about the upper herd." She did not look at Tom while she said it. She looked at Vance. Vance looked at Tom. Tom did not lower the Winchester, and he did not raise it. He held it. "Foreman?" Vance said. Foreman, Tom said. I'd want to talk to the lady of the ranch first. You're talking to her, Tom said. There was a small pause in which Vance, by Margaret's reckoning, recalculated three things. What he had expected the Bartlett ranch to look like, what he had expected its widow to look like, and what he had expected the foreman to look like. And then his face went back to where he had set it on the buggy seat, half a mile out. My apologies, ma'am, he said. I knew your husband once, in the old country. I thought I'd pay my respects. He said it loud enough that Tom heard it. He said it loud enough that the two ranch hands who had been at the corral heard it. He said it in a way that put the husband he claimed to have known into the air over the porch, like a thing that, once put there, could not be taken back down without someone naming what it was. Margaret did not look at Tom. My husband, she said evenly, passed in '68 in Indiana. That's right, ma'am. What business of yours, Mr. Vance, was my husband? We were in the railroad line together, he said. She did not answer that. She set the coffee pot on the porch rail. She wiped her hand on the chaps. She turned to Tom. Mr. Calder, will you ask Polly to bring out the cold ham? Mr. Vance has driven from Rawlins. He will not be staying long. Tom did not move at first. Ma'am, he said. Please, Mr. Calder. Tom went. He did not put down the Winchester. Margaret looked at Vance. Sit on the bench, she said. Eat. Then drive back to Rawlins. Sunday morning, if you've a thing to say to me, you may come and say it. Not before, and not under the name John Vance. His eyes went narrow. All right, he said. What name do you give in Rawlins? John Vance. You are staying at? The Ferris house. The Ferris house, she said. I have heard the new wallpaper there is yellow. It's yellow. Eat your ham, Mr. Vance. She walked past him into the ranch house. She closed the door behind her. She did not look at the buggy from the inside of the door. She walked through the front parlor, past the cold stove, past the upright piano she had bought from a German peddler in Rawlins in the fall of '80, and into the small bedroom that had been Bartlett's mother's. She closed that door too. She sat on the edge of the bed. She put both palms on her knees. She did not, that afternoon, weep. She had not wept on the morning of the 13th of December, 1868, in her aunt's parlor in Boston, when the Indianapolis newspaper had come up by post with the New Albany jail story on the third page. And she had not wept on the morning of the 7th of June, 1869, when she had paid the last installment on her aunt's mortgage with the money Sim had buried in a tin box under the third fence post west of the Seymour livery yard. Money Margaret had recovered alone, on foot, in March of that year, in a snowfall. She did not weep now. She breathed twice, slowly, the way the old scout had taught her to breathe with horses. She stood. She walked out. I have read 3 accounts of the Reno brothers and their wives. None of them gives the wife of the second eldest brother a first name that is not a guess. The federal census of 1870 in Boston lists, in a house on Mount Vernon Street belonging to a Mrs. Eunice Holt, widow, one Miss Margaret Holt, age 22, born Pennsylvania, occupation given as music teacher. The 1870 census did not require a marriage history. The girl on Mount Vernon Street had not, by any record I have seen, ever lived in Indiana under any name. She had simply, in the way of women of her time, gone back to her girlhood name and her aunt's house. The bureaucratic state did not, in 1870, possess instruments fine enough to catch her. The state of Indiana had hanged her in-laws and considered the matter closed. She came back out onto the porch at 4 o'clock. The buggy was gone. Tom Calder was at the corral fence, the Winchester still in the crook of his arm. He looked at her. He left right after the ham, Tom said. Didn't finish the coffee. No, Mrs. Holt, Mr. Calder, you knew that man before he climbed off the buggy. I did, cattle buyer. He is not, she said. Tom looked at the road. The dust was settling. Sunday, he said, Sunday. You'll want me on the porch. I will want you to stay in your bunkhouse, Mr. Calder, until the day on which I cannot manage him alone. We are not at that day." He looked at her for a long moment. He was not a sentimental man. He had served in the Texas Frontier Battalion from 74 to 79, and he had taken an arrow through the right calf in a North Texas skirmish whose name he never used in company, and he had not, by his own account, ever spoken to a woman about a difficulty that was not a horse difficulty. He was not, that afternoon, sure how to speak now. "All right," he said. "Mr. Calder, thank you." She went back inside. That evening, after the hands had eaten in the bunkhouse, after Polly had finished the dishes in the kitchen and gone back across the yard to the cabin she shared with her husband, Charlie Bird, after the house had been quiet for an hour, Margaret sat at the small kitchen table by the lamp and wrote a letter. She wrote it on the Pennsylvania-Boston paper she had bought from a stationer's in Cheyenne in the spring of '79, paper of the sort one used to write to a woman in Mount Vernon Street, Boston, paper that had cost her more than the postage. The letter was to Mrs. Eunice Holt at that address. It read in its entirety as follows: "Dearest Aunt, a man came to the ranch this afternoon who I had not seen since the September of '68 in Jackson County, and whom I had not expected to see in this life. He has given his name in Rawlins as John Vance. He will return on Sunday, and on Sunday I will know what he wants, which I do not now know. I write only that you may know also. The weather here is dry and cold, and the snow is expected. I am well. Your loving niece, Margaret." She did not sign it Holt. She did not sign it Reno. She signed it Margaret only. She put the letter in an envelope, addressed it, and walked it out by lantern to the small postbox at the gate. She paid 2 cents over the regular stamp for the registered delivery the Rawlins postmaster had begun offering in the spring. She walked back to the house in the dark. If you have come to this account looking for the wives the historians left out of the train robbery story, the small subscription beneath this telling helps me find the next one. That is the only thing I will ask of you. In the back bedroom that night, she opened the cedar trunk that had come west with her on the Union Pacific in '79, the trunk she had not opened in any of the 3 years she had lived at the Bartlett Ranch. The trunk contained 2 folded shirts of a kind no longer made, one walking dress of a cut from '66, which she had kept for reasons she did not name to herself, a packet of letters tied with a green ribbon, a thin gold band on a length of black silk cord, and at the very bottom, wrapped in oiled canvas, a pair of pearl-handled Smith & Wesson Schofield revolvers, Model 2, in .45 caliber, which had not been fired since the 17th of September, 1868, on which afternoon a small dark-haired man named Simeon Reno had fired one of them at a wooden barrel behind the Seymour livery yard, and had then handed both of them to his wife and told her to keep them and not to tell anyone she had them. She had not. He had been arrested 4 days later. He had been dead in the New Albany jail in December. She lifted the canvas. The pearl on the grips had not yellowed. The bluing of the barrels was good. The cylinders rotated true. She set the 2 revolvers on the kitchen table by the lamp, and she sat down with them, and she did not, that night, decide what she would do with them on Sunday. She decided only that, on Sunday, they would be loaded, and they would be within her reach. She put 6 rounds in each. She closed the cylinders. The click was a small noise. It was a noise she had not heard in 14 years. She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the back bedroom with 1 revolver in each hand, and she held them for the length of 3 slow breaths, the way the old man at Junction City had taught her to breathe with horses. And then she set them on top of the cedar trunk, and she closed the kitchen door. Outside, the wind had begun to come down off the Sierra Madre. The snow was, perhaps, 8 days. Vance came back on the Sunday, on horseback this time, without the buggy. He rode in at 11:30 in the morning. He wore the same hat. He did not bring a saddle gun, which Margaret saw, and he did bring a Colt at his right hip in a worn cross-draw holster, which she also saw. He had not worn the Colt in the buggy on Saturday. He had wanted, on Saturday, to be a cattle buyer. He had decided, between Saturday and Sunday, that there was no further reason for that. She met him on the porch. She was wearing the same chaps. She was not wearing the pair of Schofields on her hip. The pair of Schofields was, that morning, lying side by side on a folded woolen blanket on the kitchen table inside the closed parlour door, 6 paces from where she stood. "Mrs. Holt," Vance said. He took off his hat. "Mr. Vance." Or, "Mr. Vance on this porch. All right?" He looked past her into the doorway. Tom Calder was not visible. Tom Calder was, in fact, at that hour, on the upper pasture, riding the herd back down to the lower flats with the 2 hands. Margaret had sent him at first light. She had told him she would not have him on the porch. "Inside?" Vance said. "The parlour." She walked him through. She did not close the parlour door behind him. She took the wing-back chair by the cold stove. She left him the cane-back chair by the window. The chairs had belonged to old Mrs. Bartlett. The parlour smelled of beeswax and lamp oil and a small dish of dried rose petals that Polly kept on the side table because the bird cabin smelled of wood smoke and Polly liked the difference. Vance sat. He set his hat on his knee. "Maggie," he said. "Mrs. Holt, Mr. Vance." "Mrs. Holt, then, speak your piece." He looked at her for a slow count. "Sim buried $3,200, he said, in a tin box in March of '68, 3 miles west of the Seymour livery yard, in a stand of black oak, 3rd tree from the south end of the 2nd fence row off the Mitchell Road. He told me he buried it. He told me on the 7th of August in '68 in the back room of the New Albany Saloon, in front of Charlie Anderson and Frank Sparks. Charlie Anderson and Frank Sparks were both dead before Christmas. I lit out the week of the lynching and went to Coahuila and stayed there 14 years. I came back this June. I went and looked. The box is not there." He did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward. Margaret said nothing. She waited. "You went and got it," he said, "March of '69, in a snowfall. You used it to pay off your aunt's mortgage on Mount Vernon Street. You lived on the rest until you bought the Holt share in this ranch in '79. I know this, Mrs. Holt, because I went to Boston in July of this year. I went and looked at Mount Vernon Street. I asked at the bank. I am not a careless man. I have not been careless in 14 years. What do you want, Mr. Vance?" "Half. 1,600. She did not answer at once. "The money is not the money anymore," she said. "It is a roof, a barn, a herd, and 300 acres on Sweetwater Creek that I did not steal from anyone. I'm not asking about the money's history, Mrs. Holt. I'm asking for $1,600. You have 2 weeks. "I have until the 1st of November, he said. "Until your banknote. After that, the bank holds the deed, and we are both poorer for it. I am not a fool, Mrs. Holt. 1,600 by the 1st of November. Cash in Rawlins at the Ferris house on the morning of the 1st. And if you do not, I write to the Indianapolis Sentinel, and I write to the Boston Daily Advertiser, and I write a letter to the Pinkerton office in Denver, which letter will be opened by a man whose name I do not pretend to know, and in each of those letters I name a Mrs. Margaret Holt of Sweetwater Creek as the widow of Sim Reno, who recovered Adams Express money in March of '69, and I include the bank's mortgage record on Mount Vernon Street, which is not now a guarded document. I do this from the Ferris house in Rawlins, where I am staying under the name John Vance, which is the name I have used in 3 states for some years now. The Sentinel will print. The Advertiser will print. A Pinkerton man will come, or someone of his will. The Bartlett Ranch will be a small problem for you compared to the others." He did not raise his voice on any of it. "You have until Saturday," he said. "I leave Rawlins on the morning train Sunday for Denver. I will be at the Ferris house, 2nd floor, front room, until Saturday at noon. After noon Saturday, the letters go out." He stood. "Mrs. Holt, Mr. Vance." He put his hat on. He walked out. She did not see him to the door. She heard his boots cross the porch. She heard the saddle creak. She heard the horse turn. She heard the hooves on the road for nearly 2 minutes, and then she heard nothing. She did not stand for some time. The sun moved across the parlor floor by the width of one floorboard. Eventually she stood. She walked into the kitchen. She lifted one of the Schofields off the woolen blanket, and she looked at it. She lifted the other. She looked at it as well. She did not put either of them away. She had, on that Sunday afternoon, $411 in the iron box under the floor. She had, in her name in the bank in Rawlins, 228 more. The overdue note was $390. After the note, she would have $249 and an outfit she did not own free and clear. She did not have $1,600. She did not have any path by which she could come into $1,600 before noon Saturday. The bank in Rawlins would not lend on the deed. Tom Calder did not have $1,600. The aunt in Boston had buried her own money in the Mount Vernon mortgage 12 years before. She set the two Schofields back on the blanket. She closed the parlor door. Tom rode in at 4. He had been 7 hours on the upper pasture. The herd was down. He put his horse up and walked across the yard, and Margaret was on the porch when he came up, and she had on the same chaps and the same shirt and the same Stetson, and she had not changed her face. "Down?" she said. "Down, lower flats. They'll hold till the snow." "The mare?" "Calder mare took the lead. The roan you broke went second. You did good work on her." "Mr. Calder, Mrs. Holt, there is a section of roof on the bunkhouse south side that has, the past 4 nights, been letting in damp under the eaves. I would like, if the weather holds tomorrow, to mend it before the snow." "Tomorrow," Tom said. "All right." He looked at her. He did not ask anything. "Tom." It was the first time she had used his given name on the ranch in 3 years. He marked it. He did not say anything about it. "I will tell you on the porch tomorrow night," she said, "what I am willing to tell you. It is more than I have told anyone in 14 years. I am telling you because I will need a man on the south side of the ranch house on Saturday afternoon, and you are the man, and you have a right to know what house you are guarding." "All right, Mr. Calder, Mrs. Holt." He nodded once. He walked to the bunkhouse. She went back inside. On the Monday morning, the two of them carried the new shake shingles up the south slope of the bunkhouse roof, and they worked from a little after 7 until past 1 with 2 breaks for water, and they did not speak of Vance, and they did not speak of the cedar trunk in the back bedroom, and they spoke instead of the way the wind was working through the gap in the eaves, and of which shingles were rotten, and of how many they had on hand from the spring delivery. The work was not difficult work, but it was steady work, and there were 2 places on the slope where Margaret was the natural one to set the shingle, because Tom's right calf, which had taken the arrow in North Texas 4 years before, did not bend the way it used to bend, and there were 2 more places where Tom was the natural one because the shingles ran high on the gable. They divided the slope without discussion. They worked. The sun was thin and cold and good for the kind of work. At noon, Polly brought up cold ham and warm potatoes and coffee. They ate sitting on the ridge of the roof with their boots hooked under the cap. "Mrs. Holt," Tom said, "if I may." "Yes, this man Vance." "Yes, he is from Indiana." "He is from Indiana." "Indiana in the 60s." "Indiana in the 60s." Tom put his cup down on the shingle. He looked off toward the south paddock, where Margaret had broken the roan on Saturday morning. "Mrs. Holt," he said, "you had a husband." "I had a husband." "In Indiana." "In Indiana. In the railroad line." "In the railroad line." Tom did not speak for a long moment. "I will keep the Winchester loaded," he said, "and I will be on the south side of the house on Saturday from the noon hour to the morning of the day after, and I will not, Mrs. Holt, ask you for the surname of the man you put under the dirt 14 years ago in Indiana, because that surname is a thing you do not owe me, and I do not believe that on this ranch, in this year, a woman owes a man the surname of a man who is dead. I will tell you only one thing, ma'am. which is that I have ridden in the line of country in which Indiana railroad men hid in Coahuila for 14 years, and I have ridden with the men who hunted them, and I know what a railroad man from Coahuila wants when he comes to Wyoming in a buggy, and I know how much of it he will take if he is given any of it. He will take the ranch. He will take the next ranch. He will come back for the next. I have seen that. Tell me how much you can pay him on Saturday. I can pay him nothing. All right, Tom said, then I will be on the south side. She did not for a moment trust herself to speak. She drank the coffee. The coffee had gone cold. Mr. Calder, Mrs. Holt, Tom. Yes, ma'am, thank you. He looked at her. I have not finished my coffee, Mrs. Holt. No, I will finish my coffee. They finished the coffee. They finished the roof at 4. They did not, on the Monday, speak of Indiana again. That night, after the lamp was out, Polly Bird's granddaughter by her son Charlie Bird and his wife, the baby Sarah, 3 months old, dark of hair, with the wide, flat eyes of the Apache grandmother whom Polly had been, began to cough in the cabin across the yard, and the cough was thick and wet, and did not, on that first night, sound like a danger. By the Tuesday afternoon, the cough had a rattle in it. By the Tuesday at sundown, Polly came to the back door of the ranch house, and Polly was not a woman who cried, and Polly was crying. Margaret went across the yard. She did not that evening take a coat. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and of the bitter root tea Polly had been brewing for 2 days. The baby Sarah was in a small cradle of cottonwood that Charlie had cut and pegged from a flood-full tree on the Sweetwater Bend in May. The baby's chest was, by Margaret's hand, hotter than the lamp glass. The baby's lips, when Margaret turned the small head, were beginning to be the wrong color. Polly, Margaret said, I will sit with her tonight. You will sleep. Mrs. Holt, I have done this before. You have done this. Polly, I have done this. Lie down on the bed. I will be on the chair by the cradle. If she changes, I will wake you. Polly lay down. Polly did not sleep at once. Polly watched Margaret from the bed for a time, in the way of a woman who has decided to trust a thing and is not yet sure that she has decided right. Margaret sat in the cane chair by the cottonwood cradle. The lamp was set low. The fire was banked. The baby breathed in a way that, by Margaret's own breath counted against it, was twice as fast as it should have been. The thing she did not tell Polly that night was that in the spring of 1867, in the small house in Seymour with the green shutters, a boy 3 months old, dark of hair, with the wide round eyes of his father Sim, had begun to cough in the same way one night in March. Margaret had sat by his cradle of pine, the cradle Sim had cut and pegged from a full-down maple on the Driftwood River bend in October. She had sat with him from a little after sundown until a little before dawn. He had died at 3:45. His name had been Joseph. He had been buried in the Methodist yard outside of Seymour on the 3rd of April. His grave had a small field stone. The stone read J.R. 1867 and nothing else, because Sim had said he did not want a name on the stone that the Pinkerton would find. Margaret had agreed at the time. She had not agreed since. She thought, sitting by Sarah Bird's cradle, of the Methodist yard outside of Seymour. She had not stood at that yard since the autumn of '68. The Methodist church there had burned in '73 by an account in the Indianapolis Sentinel that she had read in Boston. She did not know whether the small stone had survived. Sarah Bird breathed. Sarah Bird breathed. Margaret put a folded damp cloth on the baby's chest at midnight and changed it at 3. She brewed a thin tea of willow bark she had learned from the old man at Junction City and got 2 spoonfuls into the baby at 4. The fever broke at 4:45. Margaret felt it break under her palm. She had not known that night that it would break. She had sat by the cradle for 9 hours and she had not, that night, known. When Polly woke, the baby was sleeping and breathing in the regular way, and Margaret was sitting in the cane chair the way she had sat at the start, and her face had not changed. Mrs. Holt, she will live, Polly. The night was the worst of it. Keep her warm tomorrow. Do not let her out of the cabin until Sunday. You stayed. I stayed. My mother's mother. Polly. I will tell you a thing one time. I had a boy. He was 3 months old. He did not live. I have sat in that chair before. Polly did not say anything for a moment. You will eat at our table tonight, Polly said. I will eat at your table tonight. Margaret walked back across the yard. The sun was coming up over the Sierra Madre, and the snow that had been forecast for that week had not yet come, and the wind was beginning to turn warmer in the way it sometimes did before snow. On the Wednesday morning, the Rawlins mail came up with the buckboard. There were 2 things in the bag for the Bartlett Ranch. The first was a slim envelope of Pennsylvania-Boston paper, postmarked Boston, in Eunice Holt's hand. The second was a Western Union telegram from John Vance at the Ferris house in Rawlins. The telegram read in full, Saturday noon, Mrs. Holt. Afterward the letters go. J.V. She read the telegram first. She put it on the kitchen table without a second look. She opened the letter from her aunt. Her aunt's hand had grown thinner in the years since '79. It was still legible. The letter said, in part, that the writer had heard nothing of the man at the door beyond what Margaret had said in her Saturday letter, and that the writer was well, and the November weather in Boston was bad, and that the writer had had a thought of which she was not proud, but which she wished to share, which thought was that the writer had gone through the writer's late husband's box of newspaper cuttings in the attic on Tuesday, and had found, dated September of 1881, a clipping from the Indianapolis Sentinel describing one Quentin Vance, formerly of Jackson County, formerly an associate of the Reno band, found deceased in a jail cell in the city of Vera Cruz on the 2nd of September of that year, identified by a Boston-trained physician, then resident in Vera Cruz, as a Mr. Quentin Vance, late of Indiana, body interred in the Protestant section of the city's cemetery on the 4th of September. The aunt had folded the cutting and was sending it under separate cover by registered delivery. It should arrive in Rawlins on the Thursday. The aunt closed with the sentence that she did not, in this matter, advise Margaret. She wrote only what she had found. Margaret read the letter twice. She folded it. She put it inside the cover of the German peddler's piano. She sat at the kitchen table for a while. She drank a cup of coffee. She did not drink the second cup that she poured for herself, which sat by her hand and went cold. Quentin Vance, by the records of the state of Indiana and of the city of Vera Cruz, and the Foreigners' Cemetery and the Indianapolis Sentinel, and the Boston Daily Advertiser, had been a dead man for 14 months. The man at the Ferris house in Rawlins was, by every register on either side of the Rio Grande, a man who did not exist. She sat for a while longer. Then she stood, and she went into the pantry of the ranch house. The pantry was a small room with a brick floor and 3 deep shelves on the west wall. On the lowest shelf, between a tin of black tea from the Cheyenne grocer's and a tin of salt, there was a small gap. The gap had been there since the cabin was built in '68. Old Mr. Bartlett had used it for a flask of corn whiskey that his wife was not to find. Margaret cleared the gap. She took down one of the pearl-handled Schofields from the kitchen table. She wrapped a clean square of muslin around the grip. She set the Schofield in the gap behind the salt, but out toward the pantry door, 6 paces from the kitchen table, at which she sat to write letters, 4 paces from the back door which she opened to bring in wood. She closed the pantry door. She did not, on the Wednesday afternoon, weep. She did not weep on the Thursday morning when the certified letter from Boston arrived with the Sentinel cutting folded inside it, and she read the Sentinel cutting of September of '81 in her own hand once and folded it back into the envelope, and she put the envelope in the cover of the piano. She did not weep on the Thursday evening when Tom Calder came up to the porch, and she told him that John Vance would come on Saturday at noon, and that Tom was to be on the south side of the house with the Winchester until she gave him a sign from the kitchen window, and that the sign would be the lamp moved from the sill to the table, and that until that sign he was not to come into the house under any circumstance, no matter what he heard. And Tom Calder said, "All right, Mrs. Holt," and walked back across the yard to the bunkhouse without further question. She did not weep on the Thursday night. She walked out, in the dark, to the small postbox at the gate, and she put a second letter into it, addressed to Mrs. Eunice Holt at Mount Vernon Street in Boston, paying 2 cents over the regular stamp for the registered delivery. The letter contained one sentence. The letter said, "Dearest Aunt, the man at the Ferris house in Rawlins will not, by Sunday morning, be in Rawlins. Your loving niece, Margaret." She did not sign that one Holt either. The Saturday came in cold and bright. The wind was out of the northwest. The snow that had been forecast was still, by the look of the sky at sunup, 2 days off. Margaret was up at 4. She built the kitchen fire. She put the coffee on. She did not that morning put on the chaps. She put on a riding skirt of dark wool and a pearl snap shirt of grey cotton, and she pulled her hair back into a single low coil at the nape of her neck, and pinned it with a tortoise-shell comb that her aunt had given her in the September of '73. She did not put on the Stetson. She put a thin shawl across her shoulders against the kitchen chill. She wanted that morning to be seen as a woman in a house, not as a horsebreaker at a corral. It was a calculation. She had laid the first of the pair of Schofields an hour before in the top drawer of the kitchen sideboard, behind the small wooden box of cornbread knives, butt out toward her left hand. She had checked the load 3 times. She had checked it for the 3rd time at 5:30 and had not opened the drawer again. The second of the pair was where she had set it on the Wednesday afternoon, in the pantry, behind the salt tin, butt out toward the pantry door. At 7, Tom Calder came up to the kitchen door. He had the Winchester. He had a second cartridge belt at his hip, in addition to the Colt he ordinarily wore. He did not come inside. "South side, Mrs. Holt," he said. "I'll be at the corner of the smokehouse where the angle covers the porch steps and the front gate." "Tom." "Yes, ma'am. He may not be alone." Tom did not answer at once. "He may not be alone," she said again. "He is a man who has lived for 14 years in country where one rides with 2. The bell will be the lamp from the sill to the table. Until the bell, you do not move." "Until the bell," Tom said. "If he is not alone, the bell will come early. If he is alone, the bell may not come at all, and you will hold the corner of the smokehouse from noon until the morning." "All right, ma'am." "Tom," he looked at her, "if a thing goes wrong in the parlour and the bell does not come, you will hear it in the parlour. You will come in through the back kitchen door, not the front. Back kitchen door. There is a Schofield in the top drawer of the kitchen sideboard. If I am not in a state to hand it to you, take it." "All right." "Tom." "Mrs. Holt." "I am—" She did not, for a moment, know what she had been about to say. "Mrs. Holt," he said. "You are, that is enough." He nodded. He stepped down off the porch. He walked across the yard to the smokehouse. Polly came to the back door of the cabin and looked across, and Margaret raised her hand once, and Polly nodded and shut the door and did not bring Sarah Bird out for the rest of that day. Charlie Bird had been sent to Rawlins on the Friday morning with both the senior hand and the spring wagon, on the pretext of a load of feed corn from the Lawson granary that would not be ready until Monday. Margaret had not wanted Charlie or the boys on the ranch on the Saturday. They would, by her best calculation, arrive back at the ranch at sundown on the Monday with 3 days of stories about a granary problem and a free room over the Rawlins livery yard. They were not to be in this. She had decided that on the Wednesday afternoon, in the pantry behind the salt. At 11, she stopped working. She sat at the kitchen table. She did not read. She did not write. She drank 1 cup of coffee. The cup of coffee finished at 20 minutes past 11. She rinsed the cup. She put it back on the dish rail. At 11:45, she sat down again. The Sweetwater wind moved the kitchen curtain by an inch and let it back. Vance came in at 4 minutes past 12. He was not alone. Margaret saw the dust before she saw the riders. 3 horses, 3 men, abreast on the Rawlins road. They turned in at the gate. Vance was the centre rider. The 2 on either side were leaner men, both in dark coats, both with rifles in scabbards on the off side. One had a hat pulled low over the eyes. The other rode loose in the saddle in the way of men who have ridden in country with no road for years at a stretch. Margaret stood. She walked at her usual pace out onto the porch. She held the parlour door open with her left hand. She did not yet move the lamp. Vance reined in at the porch rail. The two riders stayed mounted, 10 paces back, one to either side of the gate. "Mrs. Holt," Vance said. He did not take off his hat. "Mr. Vance, I told you noon. You are 4 minutes late." "I had to wait at the crossroad for a buckboard. Your friends." "Are my friends, Mrs. Holt? In the parlour we will be 3. In the parlour we will be 2. The boys stay out." "All right." She walked back through the parlour door. He followed. She heard him close the door behind himself. She did not turn to watch him do it. She did not, walking through the parlour, turn down the kitchen hall toward the sideboard. She walked instead to the wing-back chair by the cold stove and stood beside it. She did not sit. He came around the cane-back chair by the window and did not sit either. "You have the money," he said. "I have not the money." He looked at her for a slow count. "Mrs. Holt." "I have not the money, Mr. Vance, and I will not, between now and Saturday next, come into the money. And I think you know I will not. So we will have a different conversation." His right hand moved a half-inch toward the Colt at his cross drawer and stopped. "What conversation? You are a dead man, Mr. Vance." "Am I now?" "You died on the 2nd of September, 1881, in a jail cell in Vera Cruz, of a fever the foreigners' hospital recorded as yellow. A Boston-trained physician, then resident in the port, signed your certificate. You were buried on the 4th in the foreigners' yard. The Indianapolis Sentinel printed the notice on the 18th. The Boston Daily Advertiser carried it on the 23rd. I have read both. He did not move. I have a copy of the Sentinel notice in this house, Mr. Vance. My aunt in Boston has the cutting. My aunt has, by Wednesday, also written to the Boston attorney who handles such things for our family, and the attorney has, by Friday morning, written to the Pinkerton Agency in Denver. Whether the Denver office chooses to act on a letter regarding the late Quentin Vance is not my business. They may act tomorrow. They may act in the spring. They may have already mislaid the letter. What I am saying to you, Mr. Vance, is that there is not, on either side of the Rio Grande, any office which will look for you because you are not anywhere. You have spent 14 years arranging that. You have done your work well. You did not, when you arranged it, calculate for a Boston-trained physician in Vera Cruz." His face had gone still in a way she remembered from Seymour. "That is a long speech, Mrs. Holt." "It is. It does not change the letters. It changes the man who writes the letters. A man who does not exist cannot write to the Indianapolis Sentinel without the Sentinel sending the matter to a coroner. You may write the letters. The Sentinel will print them, perhaps. But the Sentinel will also print, perhaps on the same page, the small piece about the Vera Cruz jail, because no editor in Indianapolis in 1882 will run a 14-year-old Reno story without first checking what is presently known of the man who sent it. The Sentinel, Mr. Vance, in the past 5 years has hired 3 new reporters and has begun to check. Do not overestimate the Sentinel, Mrs. Holt. I have read 3 years of the Sentinel by post in Boston. I do not overestimate it. I have estimated it. Maggie. Mrs. Holt, you are bluffing. I am not. He moved. The thing he did was small and fast and very practiced. His right hand was at the Colt, and the Colt was clearing the holster before she had finished the word "not." He was a man who had drawn against trained men in 3 countries and was, by the standard of any saloon in Coahuila, a fast draw. She had, on the Wednesday afternoon, after she put the Schofield in the pantry, gone back into the kitchen and stood at the wing-back chair by the cold stove and walked from it in a single step 3 times to the kitchen hall door. She had measured how far. She had measured how many seconds. She had practiced the step. She did not, in the parlour, take the step toward the kitchen sideboard. The sideboard was 9 paces. She took the other step. There was, on the floor of the wing-back chair, on the right side of the cushion under a fold of woolen blanket that had been there for 2 weeks, a third pearl-handled Schofield. It was Tom Calder's. He had handed it to her on the Friday evening in the pantry without a word. He had carried it home from the Frontier Battalion in '79. She had loaded it on the Friday night. It was set butt out toward her left hand. She had practiced the step that lifted the blanket and the step that closed the right hand on the grip and the step that turned the muzzle. She had practiced it 11 times. She had not, in the practice, fired. She fired once. The round took Quentin Vance high in the chest on the left side. He had time to half complete the draw. He did not have time to bring the Colt level. He went back against the caneback chair, and the caneback chair went over with him, and he was on the floor of the parlor by the window, and the Colt was on the floor beside him, and his hand was open. She did not, in the next 3 seconds, move the lamp from the sill to the table, because the 2 riders at the gate had heard the round. The first rider, the one with the hat pulled low, fired through the parlor window from the saddle, and the round took the upright piano in the German peddler's veneer 2 feet to the left of where Margaret was standing. Margaret was already on her knees by the wing-back chair. The second round through the window took the wing-back chair across the top of the cushion. From the corner of the smokehouse, the Winchester 73 spoke. She heard it speak twice. The 2 reports were perhaps 2 seconds apart. The first one took the rider with the hat pulled low through the throat and put him backwards out of the saddle into the dust. The second one took the second rider in the ribs as he was turning his horse for the road. He did not go out of the saddle on the first round. He brought his own rifle up. Tom's third round took him through the side of the head. The third rider's horse ran. There was, for a space of perhaps 5 seconds, no sound but the wind in the eaves and the breathing of Quentin Vance on the parlor floor, which breathing was wet and slow and not, by the third breath, recovering. Margaret stood up. She walked across to the parlor window. She picked up Vance's Colt from where it had fallen. She broke the cylinder. There were 6 rounds. She closed it. She set it on the cane-back chair that had not gone over. She walked into the kitchen. She moved the lamp from the sill to the table. Tom came in through the back kitchen door 11 seconds later. He had the Winchester in his right hand and the Colt in his left, and his left shoulder, where the second rider's rifle round had caught him as Tom had stepped clear of the smokehouse corner to take the third shot, was wet through the shirt. The bullet had gone through. Mrs. Holt, Tom, how many in the house? 1, down. Yard? 2, down. I heard. Yard yours, yard mine. Your shoulder, through. She walked him to the kitchen table. She set him in the chair. She cut the shirt with the bone-handle kitchen scissors that had been her aunt's. The wound was clean on both sides. The bullet had missed the bone. She did not, at that moment, faint. She had not fainted in 14 years of conducting herself in the company of other people, and she did not, in the kitchen of the Bartlett Ranch at 12 minutes past 12 on the 4th of November in 1882, faint then. She heated water. She poured carbolic from the brown bottle she had kept since '79. She packed the wound on both sides. She bound it with strips of clean linen she had cut from a sheet on the Friday afternoon for that purpose. Tom did not speak through any of it. "Vance," he said when she had finished. "Vance, did he know your name?" "He knew my name." "Then he is the last man living to have known it." "He is." "All right." She did not, for a moment, answer. She rinsed her hands. She dried them on the cloth that hung from the dish rail. She walked back into the parlor. She stood over Quentin Vance. His breathing had stopped between the rinsing and the drying. She did not, that afternoon, weep. In the yard, Polly had come out of the cabin with the baby Sarah on her hip and the long shotgun that Charlie kept in the cradle by the cabin door, and she was, by the time Tom and Margaret came out onto the porch, walking the length of the gate fence and looking at the 2 riders on the ground without expression. The shotgun was held in the way of a woman who knew how to hold one. "Polly," Margaret said. Mrs. Holt, they are dead. They are dead, Polly. Will you ride to Rawlins for the sheriff? There is the buckboard mare in the lower paddock, and there is the saddle in the barn. You ride. Tom is wounded. I will stay with him. I want the sheriff here by sundown. I will ride. She did. The baby Sarah was, on Polly's instruction, left in the cabin with the door bolted. Polly rode for Rawlins at 1:30 on the buckboard mare. She rode the 16 miles in 2 hours and 10 minutes, which time, Sheriff Michael Hannigan would say later that evening, was as good a time as any rider on his books had made on the Rawlins Road in the past 4 years. Hannigan rode back with her. He brought the deputy. He brought the Rawlins coroner, a man named Mr. Allspice, who was also the bookseller. He brought 4 men of the town as witnesses. They reached the Bartlett Ranch at 20 minutes to 7. Margaret met them on the porch. She had cleaned the parlor floor. She had not moved Vance. She had set the 2 colts and Vance's colt on the kitchen table. She had laid out her aunt's Sentinel cutting of September of '81 beside them, and the Boston Daily Advertiser piece of the 23rd, and the registered delivery envelope in which they had arrived from Boston with her aunt's hand on it. She had set out the 2 Schofields. She had set out the 3rd one, Tom's, on its own. She told Sheriff Hannigan in the kitchen of the Bartlett Ranch by lamplight, beginning at 20 minutes to 7 and finishing at 8:15, what had happened on her ranch on that afternoon. She told it from the moment Vance had ridden in on the previous Saturday in a buggy. She named in the telling no Indiana surname for herself. She named, for the man on the floor in the parlor, only the name John Vance, late of the Ferris house in Rawlins. She let Sheriff Hannigan read the Sentinel cutting and the Advertiser cutting and the certified envelope. He read them slowly. He folded them. He put them on the table. "Mrs. Holt," he said, "Sheriff, this man came onto your ranch with 2 men armed to take this ranch off you." He did. On the strength of letters he meant to write that you would have had no answer for. On that strength. You drew first inside the house. I did. On a man who had drawn first. On a man who had drawn first, yes. Mr. Calder. Yes, sir. You held the yard. I held the yard. On 2 men shooting from horseback. Yes, sir. Hannigan looked at Tom's shoulder. He looked at the kitchen floor. He looked at the 3 Schofields on the table. "Mrs. Holt," he said, "I have known you on this Sweetwater for 3 years. I have known Mr. Calder for 2. I have not, in either of those tenures, known either of you to be on the wrong side of a fence. The man on your parlor floor is, by the papers your aunt has sent up from Boston, 14 months in the ground in Vera Cruz, which is to say, he is no one in the state of Wyoming and a citizen of no other state. The 2 men in your yard, whom I will inquire after tonight at the Ferris house, are, I expect, of the same description. I will write this up as the defense of a homestead under attack by parties unknown, and I will sign it tonight, and I will file it in the territorial court on Monday morning, and the Bartlett Ranch will continue to be what it was on Friday. Sheriff, Mrs. Holt, thank you. Mr. Calder, I will have Mr. Allspice ride back with the bodies. I will have the doctor up tomorrow morning to look at that shoulder. You are not to use that arm for 2 weeks. Mrs. Holt will see to it." "She will see to it," Tom said. "All right." Hannigan rode out at 9:30. The 4 men of the town rode with him. They took the 3 bodies. The buckboard from Rawlins took 2 of them, and a pack horse took the 3rd. Polly stayed at the ranch with Sarah Bird, and Charlie was sent for in the morning. By the Sunday at noon, the story was in Rawlins. By the Sunday at sundown, it was in Lawson's granary, and the Lawson men were telling it back to Charlie Bird, who had not yet been told it by Polly. By the Monday morning, the Reverend Mr. Carmichael of the Rawlins Methodist Church preached on the text, "She opened her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness," from Proverbs, and named, in the body of the sermon, the widow Mrs. Holt of the Bartlett Ranch as an example of the lady who, in the country we now inhabit, held her household by the strength of her own quietness, when no man could hold it for her. The Reverend Mr. Carmichael was, by every account, not a man for the strong word. He did not use a strong word on that Monday morning. He used the word quietness. The pews of the Rawlins Methodist Church were, on that Monday morning, more full than they had been since the funeral of old Mr. Bartlett in '78. Margaret was not at the Rawlins Methodist Church. Margaret was in the parlor of the Bartlett Ranch at noon on the Monday, sitting in the wing-back chair by the cold stove, with the piano lid open and the sentinel cutting in her hand. Tom was in the cane-back chair by the window, with his left arm in a sling that her aunt had taught her, in '73, on Mount Vernon Street, to fold from a square of muslin. "Tom," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You did not, this past week, ask me my name." "No, ma'am, I will tell it to you, once, in this room. I will not say it again on this ranch." "All right. My name was Margaret Reno. Before that, my name was Margaret Holt. After Indiana, it was Margaret Holt again. After the 17th of January 1879, when I bought the Bartlett share, it was Mrs. Holt of Sweetwater Creek. It will be Mrs. Holt of Sweetwater Creek until I die. The name in between you have heard. You will not, after today, hear it from me in this house." "All right, Tom, Margaret." He said it without the title. He did not say Reno. "Margaret," he said again. She put the sentinel cutting back inside the cover of the piano. She closed the cover. She walked over to his chair. He held out his right hand, his good hand. She took it. He held it for the length of 3 slow breaths, the way the old man at Junction City had taught her to breathe with horses. Then he let it go. I have written to the Wyoming State Museum in Cheyenne twice on the question of the Bartlett Ranch on Sweetwater Creek. The ranch was sold in 1923 by a Mrs. Margaret Calder to a Mr. Phineas Daly of Rawlins, who broke it up into 3 smaller holdings. The original ranch house, a frame structure put up by old Mr. Bartlett in 1868 and added to by his son Will in '71, stood until a grass fire in May of 1941, which fire was started, by all accounts, by a careless rancher burning brush on the Mitchell allotment. Of the parlor furniture, the upright piano, German-made, survived the fire because it had been moved out of the parlor to the Calder House in Rawlins in 1918, and it now sits, restored, in the parlor of the Carbon County Historical Society on East Buffalo Street. The German peddler's veneer has, on the front panel, 2 feet to the left of the keyboard, a small repaired hole, which the curator at Carbon County will tell you is from a rifle round fired through a parlor window in 1882. The curator is, in her